and it's already been brought up by Bobby, because he said it earlier whenever he said that don't start off too big. Well, actually, Mynor said don't start off too big. Number one, but for Bobby, he was mentioning every night he had his own check that he had to go out and do every single night, and trying to do too much all at one time, which is what Mynor said. If you overdo it, then you just get too stressed out with it. And so a measured approach, which is what you're talking about, number one, covers a lot of bases, because if you do a measured approach, you're going to save money in the long run, because you're going to find out what you need, right? And then after you find out what you need, you begin to gain knowledge on the other little things that you're going to put yourself into inside the hobby. The downside is that people like James and people like Mynor and people like yourself like to do these crazy, amazing props or new items or moving heads or whatever, and you see them doing this crazy stuff, and you realize, like, that string of lights that I put on my roof outline is just not going to be enough. I need more. So,
but again, your audience doesn't care, because it's literally the best thing they've seen.
Look, and Bobby's waving his card.
Here, take my card. Here's my money.
So as kind of similar to what I asked Mynor, as a vendor, what trends or common questions have you noticed from your customers, and what have you tried to do to meet those challenges whenever you when it comes to supporting the people that are in the community?
Well, I'd say the majority of the questions, and that's something I also try to do, is I do most of the support myself. We do have a wonderful Discord channel that handles that. The community is really important in every aspect. I'd say most of the questions are going to be electrical questions, voltage injection, what resistance is good, why doesn't my Dig quad send data more than 30 feet, that sort of thing. Other ones, let's say another third is going to be computer and networking problems. Why doesn't my device get an IP address? Why can't I get this? Why can't I connect FPP to my controller? And these are the same controllers you're going to get whether it's a Falcon controller or a WLED controller. And I'd say the other third, honestly, xLights. I love xLights. I appreciate xLights for what it is. An amazing piece of software that's free. But it is very complicated, and it's very intimidating. It's gotten better. But for somebody who's just taking their first look at it, it's scary as hell. So we do spend time answering a lot of questions about that. So as far as my product offering was concerned, I wanted to give people the option. You don't need to jump into moving heads. You don't need to jump into xLights. You don't need to jump into complex networking, proxying, FPP servers, or doing, FPP remotes or anything like that. You can start off simply. We can learn some basic networking along the way, and once you start establishing that foundation, you start to expand, you start to grow in these different fields. Now, what was I going to say? I'm also trying to get into doing some YouTube documentation, but the next biggest difficulty is time. Right? I'm just one guy. Right? I don't know much you guys know about me. I have a full-time job besides this. I'm also the mayor of my town. I've got 4 kids, 2 of them are in college, so yeah, it's crazy. It's just a matter of trying to find all the time to do this and give back to this hobby that has given me so much during a time when I really needed it.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate it, and I have to say, whenever I ordered my starter kit and I got my controller, and I needed my handheld, and Jason walked me right through it. And it was, and I did. I had a little bit of issue with WLED. I don't have that issue anymore because I really took my time sitting down and figuring it out after he and I spent some time on the phone with it. And I found it to be very helpful to do very simple things. Like, I just wanted to put some floodlights up, and that worked great until the rain came and the controller box opened and flooded it, and now that board is gone. So, but we all go through these kind of growing pains, and if there's anybody that's seen growing pains, it's definitely James, because he's been in the hobby now for what would you say, like 15 years? You've been doing this now, James? 16?
Oh, I mean, decorating goes back further than that, but as a business, legally as a business, almost 12 years now. So yeah,
So,
we were doing it before then, but yeah, it became a real business, a registered business, if you will.
so you hit on it earlier, and I want to give you some good time to kind of walk people through some things. But as a designer of the original Mega Tree strips, I mean, that's probably the single largest impact on the entire community. There are you probably count them on maybe a set of fingers and toes. How many people don't build their Mega Tree with a Mega Tree strip? And you came up with that. I mean, previous to the Mega Tree strip, and this is what worth mentioning, is it used to be, and this is where I came into the hobby in 2012. You taped your pixels with electrical tape to pallet strapping, which you then use electrical tape to fold and around and insert through a D-ring, which you would hang on the top of your Mega Tree topper that you created using a frying pan and screw-in hooks. So,
Yeah.
This was the beginning. This is where many people started, and that's. I mean, when it came to me building a Mega Tree, and I did a video. And Jason mentioned doing videos. I used to do a video. Oh, it's easy to go do a video. No, you got to edit that damn thing, and that takes hours sometimes. And then whenever I was done building my Mega Tree, I said part 2 coming soon. Hell no, I don't want people to see how bad this thing turned out. But it worked, and it worked for a number of years. The reason I bring this up is because you designed that strip, and it was a huge impact on all of us. I no longer have to tape my pixels to a piece of pallet strapping anymore, which thank God. But what are some of the challenges new people have had whenever you consider the props that you're producing or you've produced in the past? And I know you touched on this, but what are some of the challenges that you faced and that you had to spend more time doing work on explaining and giving support on?
Probably one of the bigger challenges, is, of course, is models. I think people are still, today most people don't know how to make a model. They'll never enjoy making a xLights model using Excel in an imported image. Be thankful for that. Or going to, Nutcracker 123 and creating a little bitty portion of a sequence to copy and paste it into your Vixen so you can run pixels. I mean, people they'll never understand that anymore. I mean, it's come so far, but props, a lot's changed in our props. Now we do pixel paths. Anything new that comes out of our shop, everything new will have a pixel path. The challenge we face is we've been doing this for almost 12 years now. There are hundreds, up to 1,000 props that are legacy props that have been around forever, and we're slowly going back and revisiting those and applying what has become standards now and making that to the old legacy props and updating them. So you'll see some of our props have a V2 version, or there'll be a discontinued version, but we can't just get rid of the old one because people still have those props, and so we still have to maintain that model built into xLights so they can see it and download it and use it. But going forward, it would switch to a new version. I think as the software has gotten a lot easier, and I know Jason said it's very challenging to use, it used to be way worse. I can tell you when 2015, the year before Great Christmas Light Fight for us, was my last year using Vixen. Light Fight was the first year in 2016 that we used xLights. Ooh. And it was because it was such a huge learning curve to switch from Vixen to xLights. And honestly, the biggest reason I had to switch is my show was so big we couldn't sequence it with Vixen.
I remember that.
We maxed it out, and it was just stupid. And John Chula was so proud whenever he was finally able to work with their guys and get Vixen to run my show, because it was almost like they used it as a benchmark. There was just so much going on in it, and they finally got it working, just on an old piece of junk laptop. He brought it to me. We were at a Christmas expo. It was the one in Chicago, and he brought the laptop, and he was so ecstatic that they finally fixed their performance issues in Vixen. But like I said, in 2016, we converted the whole show over, and it comes down to how do you set your show up. Vixen, you could set your whole show up and never worry about a controller. Back then, xLights, you had to know your controller, you had to know your absolute channel numbers, and you make one change to something early, it shifted all of your absolute channels down, and it was just so cumbersome. It was such a pain. Now it's so easy, and it's almost mind-numbing because of things like the visualizer, and you just push your config out to all your controllers. It's just pushing a button. I mean, it's so freaking simple.
So what would you say? What would you say the biggest challenge now today for users that are in the hobby, that because your designs have changed. There were the days that we talked about earlier in your introduction of 168 pixels, and where that number specifically comes from is there's 170 pixels that are in one full universe, but to get an even number divisible, you didn't use 170, you used 168, and so he still sells them to this day, and they're one of my favorite props, and we use them in our pro layout. We use the modular matrix panels, and it's a column of 4 by 42, which is 168, and we put two of those side by side, and they make a beautiful column, very easy to put together. It's in some of the best material. Not that I'm trying to sell this to you guys, but I always appreciated it, because whenever I use my Sand Device controller, I set up that little quadrant to fit one freaking universe or two universes and plug them all into that thing, and it was like, oh man, this is so easy, this is nice. And so we're past those days where people give a crap that it fits in a universe, and now we care about something even different, which is it an even string of pixels. I was talking to somebody today, and they were telling me, I really hate pushing these props whenever they're not exactly 50 counts or 100 count pixels. I hate it, because I have to make a choice here. What do I do at the end? And
snowflakes are a prime example, right? So if you got a snowflake that's got 6 arms, well, 6 might not go evenly into 100 or 50 or whatever you're trying to work with. And that's, back then, I was all about symmetry, right? And so you'll look at like a 50 node 3-prong fancy. Well, it's got 48 nodes plus 2 somewhere. Well, we put them in the core where it's not as obvious, right? You don't have an extra arm. And that's, again, people are scared to cut pixel strings. I don't get the fear. I hate to tell you, I don't care who you buy your pixels from. They're going to go out. It happens. It's just, all these things are made overseas. You're talking about putting electronics out into the environment. Pixels are going to die. It's going to happen. You're going to have to cut that wire eventually. Unless you're going to be the type that just pulls the whole strand out and put a whole new strand in. That's up to you.
If you've got a 50 count pixel string, it might, 50 pixels is nothing to push, especially in one of those small props. But if now that we're to the modern era, what do you see today's people having issues with your props? What are the big things that you see where people really get held up? You've already mentioned the biggest challenge with them is figuring out the models and which models to use. But specifically now with Coro props and your props in general, what have you found you have to spend the most time supporting?
Well, we've taken, I guess, all the feedback that we've gotten, and we try to address those. We try to remove splicing so people don't have to splice, because the gap is too far between, one section to another. Even node counts, like I say, everything new we produce, we try to make everything new. I can't do nothing about shipping. That's FedEx. But it's the pixel path. I think that's the biggest thing. We do that on all the new props. It's not an upcharge. That's going to be always included free on our stuff. We don't charge for it. But, as we retrofit some of the older props, they get the pixel path. But, of course, anything new. And I think that's probably the biggest helper, especially as we start doing these props that, a 4-foot prop that's got 500-600 pixels in it, they're going to be really close to each other. And when you're looking at the xLights model, it's tough to follow it sometimes, right? Because things overlap, or if you got an arm and it's going up and down that arm, it's just right on top of each other, so it makes it a challenge. Um, and I will say, xLights has refined the models on how we look at the wiring views. We can actually control the resolution on it when we create the models now. So whenever you import that model into your layout, it actually looks like it should. I do wish, since Scott's here, can I make a request? Can we make it so when we export native models, they export nice and smooth? But there's certain props that we use native models for xLights. Megatrees, stars, arches, things like that. We don't create a model for it and put it there. It's built into xLights. You can use it. The problem is, try it for yourself, is create a flat tree, but using the Megatree model. You create it, you export it, and then re-import it. Well, your lines aren't going to be straight. I don't, it's just, and I guess it's a resolution. Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the resolution of how it exports it out, they're jaggedy lines. It feels like I was on crack when I was drawing the lines. But the native model, when you make it and you leave it in xLights and copy it and paste it within xLights, it's fine. It's beautiful. So we would have to go and create a custom model instead of using the native model, and then we could actually include it with all the model downloads. But again, just use the native models. But that's probably the hardest thing that we're trying to fix for the end users, is just, again, the no splicing, and ease of following how to put the lights into the prop. I think that's their biggest challenge. I still don't think that every prop has to have 500 pixels in it. I like the idea of there's focal points in your show.
I 100% agree with you, because the biggest thing, everything starts to look just like every other high definition prop. And so pretty soon you can't tell the difference between, oh, this is a this and this is a this, and at some point everything needs to be its own creation. And if you have 34-foot round discs on your display, you're looking at everything all at once. They're like giant snowflakes at that point. And so that's the challenge for me. Whenever I'm programming, I imagine that everybody doesn't have what I have, and if they had to take what I sequenced and apply it to something different, how does that look for them? And so, yeah, I see it from my perspective and what I do. But just to hear, the challenges that you face as a vendor in the Coro space, you have your own way of having to address them, and you have worked, and I know that you worked with Scott specifically on trying to get the pixel path to work, and that was an absolute fail the first time around. That didn't go very well.
No, there was a learning curve there.
A learning curve,
yeah.
but it wasn't a fail because we still figured it out, and you still use that model today. It's still well used today, and that didn't change. But the thing is my hope in just facilitating this is that everybody gets to see that we're not up here crying about our business and having to do things. We go along with the flow with everybody else, and we learn we learn things literally as we take this step. Okay, this is what's going to happen. I don't know. Close your eyes and just cross your fingers, and then poof, and stuff happens sometimes, and you just do the best you can to recover. Legacy is an issue with a lot of things. We experience that as well. And just in general, so a lot of things you say, James, it just really resonates, not just with me, and I see everybody's head shaking along with me. So
yeah, it's just a challenge, especially, again, we're probably one of the oldest prop manufacturers, especially when you get into 10 mil for pixels, specifically for pixels. I think we were the first doing that anyway. It's tough going all the way back to day one and trying to retrofit some of that stuff.
So
you're constantly moving forward.
So James, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Scott here, because Scott's had a chance to listen to Bobby, who has set up 2 shows on his own. His family helps him. He has got little kids that are his labor that put his show up with him. He makes indentured servants, if I remember that's the word he used. You have Mynor, who was a hobbyist in the Halloween side, and just within the past 2 years started doing Christmas. And he runs Your Pixel Store, and he never did Christmas, and then all of a sudden he's a pixel vendor. And and now you got Jason, who just appreciates the fact that everybody is out there and trying to learn, and he sees them challenged, and he steps up to do the best he can with his controllers to get people started under a budget to see that they actually can enjoy doing it, and to start off small and grow bigger. And then we have James, who's been in the hobby 12 years, 13 years business-wise, but in the hobby for much longer, and he's seen it from the generational-wise. Scott has seen it from the technical side, which is something that is very hard for people to articulate. So Scott, with that being said, beginners often experience stress and feel extremely overwhelmed. With so many features and capabilities, where would you say is the best place for all of these people, for new people, to really begin with xLights? And take as much time as you need, because there's a lot to this. There really is.
I feel like it's a stacked question a little. Where do you start? I guess I personally think the important thing in xLights is like your models. Like if your models are right, your sequencing will never be right. So, like I know it's the second page, and it's always like the best thing to start with. And I don't know if Clyde's done a video on it recently, but there are some great like just starter videos, 10-minute videos on how do you make models of your props. And I know it is a little confusing in xLights. We call them models, and most people call them props. It's just a lineage thing. But you gotta like basically, I don't know, plan your models, make sure they're right. And it's some of the challenges of xLights are with the new auto mode. It does restrict how you can do some models. It does make it where you need to have strings that are the same length. If you have unbalanced strings, like if you have a mega tree and you want to try to have numbers where you go up a certain amount and go down a certain amount on ports, but you want them to be different, it's not really supported. So there's some things you got to learn about that. But I guess I'd really just find videos online, or sometimes I do work on the manual a lot. I know some people get discouraged when they watch a video and they'll be like, oh, it looks way different, or in this video there's 4 buttons on the side and now there's 5 buttons in xLights. I sometimes think people get caught up with those little things, but normally the concepts are still there.
So if I can ask, what models are the hardest models for people to understand?
I don't know, it seems to be like the circle models, and some of those, like these larger high density models can be hard. And I know a lot of the models now we've added, I'm personally not a fan, we've added all these settings for kind of weird ways people wire stuff. Like the mega tree now has options where in theory you always go up and down with your strings if you have folds. Now there's options where you don't have to do that. And I see new people now who click that option not knowing what the heck it does, because it's just, they randomly pick stuff. So I feel like when you have a model, the things you got to think about is like where it starts, where it ends, how many strings you're going to have, how many strands is what we call it, like that's the number of ups, and the number of pixels. And those are kind of like the 3 values that matter. So number of strings normally is like your controller ports. So, and it's always better, I think, like you don't have to, in xLights, if you want to, you can just draw your models with no controllers. Like you don't even need to set up controllers. You can set up trees, and you can put an image of your house, just start drawing things that you want to put on there. And I kind of like what Bobby was saying, some others, is I wouldn't go crazy either. Maybe it's your first year, you just pick 10 props that you want. And that's still a lot, I think, for your first year. Like my first year, I think I had 4 arches, 4 mini trees, and a roof outline. So it's like, start with simple things like that, like have arches, have mini trees, and kind of similar to like the easy RGB thing, where you can kind of just pick some props that you want. Maybe go to the Boscoyo download, see, do I want this flake, put that on my house, and just start with, and then look at the wiring and see how it's wired, and make sure you document all that stuff before you just start pushing pixels in, because it's a lot easier to know it initially than it is to go back and try to fix it. And some things to, like, you know, the ESP pixel sticks, those are good for when you start doing controllers, but one thing that's really hard in xLights is going across controllers. So if you have a prop that has, like, you want to use 4 ports, it's better to keep it on one controller. Like if you're trying to use 2 1-port ESP pixel sticks, you can do it with shadow models, but my opinion, if you're using shadow models, you're kind of already doing it wrong. So it's like it's always keep it as simple as possible, I think, and you'll have more success than trying to do something crazy. I personally, with xLights, I know, not to plug PPD, but it's like sequencing is I never worry about, because I don't really. I tried to sequence my first couple of years, and then you see Clyde sequences, and you're like, well, just give up. So it's like it's a lot easier, I think.
Hey, I think you did pretty good on your sequence, which was the dark side, the cell dweller.
Yeah,
you did.
It took me like 8 months.
You did a hell of a job on it, though. I mean, Scott, you did. You did. I give you 100% credit on that. It's the one in the Google Drive, by the way.
Yeah. So it's like, I think when you're first starting out, and models are the most important, because if they're wrong and then you try to play a sequence and you're like, oh, I have effects wrong, well, maybe you have channel overlap in your models, and that's why you're seeing random red over here. It's not because your sequence is wrong. So let's always like use check sequence, and check sequence is kind of a misnomer. We should probably rename it. It doesn't just check your sequence, it checks your layouts, it checks your configs. It kind of shows you, and channel overlap. It's very hard to get channel overlap nowadays with the newer features with the auto controller stuff, but it still is possible to get. So I don't know, that's kind of my tips. There are a lot of videos out there. Some are very old. I know Clyde. I like Clyde's. There's also David Henry. I don't know if he's an affiliate as well. I think it's Learn Christmas Lighting.
Yep.
He does some really good 10-minute videos on here's how you do just a real basic. On the videos xLights page, I used to pin a lot of his videos because I really liked how simple, and he's very, I don't know, I feel he's very good at articulating concepts, and I don't know, I could understand it well, so I felt like they were good videos as well. So it's kind of basics. I would start with the models, make sure you have models right, and you can always look at the node layout, the wiring view to kind of make sure you match. Then once you have that figured out, then you can start going into controllers, because that's what really matters. And once you're sure that everything is working, then you can start going into your sequencing. Do sequencing. I know some people like to sequence first because, you know, you can actually sequence without, you know, physically anything on the house. But again, I personally don't do much sequencing anymore. I just mostly use PPD stuff. I think I have all my sequences are PPD at this point, except maybe one. So
I'm not paying you for that, by the way. Oh wait, maybe I should. Hold on, where's my wallet? I might have 20. I have to give him $20 for that one. Anyway.
No, I don't want to bash other vendors because I have some other vendors' sequences I have nothing but issues with, but the PPD ones are always bulletproof to get working on my house. So as someone, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. As someone involved in the development side of the community, what are 2 or 3 of the common setup? You know, we're going out in the yard, we're putting our props in place, and what are some of the common setup challenges you notice that xLights users encounter, and what tips do you have for them to kind of overcome those? Yeah, I think like the 2 biggest things always is like networking, which I know Jason talked about, is always hard for people, and I get it. And me personally, like my first year, I plugged everything into my home router. I ran a cable through the window in my guest bedroom, ran that outside, plugged the controller in, used xSchedule, and you can have a pretty simple setup. So sometimes I think people overcomplicate show networks, and I got to do a bridge. Just plug it in your home network, or go get a cheap switch, a cheap 5-port, and just run your whole show off that and plug your computer into it as well. The biggest thing I've seen recently is now like smart receivers, and I know I've had some discussions with Rob about it, and I believe Clyde as well, of how we can make that easier, because the concept of smart receivers is a huge challenge, because you have this concept of streams, kind of, like you're really daisy chaining 4 receivers, which is really hard for anyone to understand, and why should a user understand that? So I really hope someday we maybe make that as another level to the visualizer, where you could say, I have a smart receiver, it opens another window, and you have your 16 ports, you put your props on it, you don't really care that that's 4 ports or whatever under the hood. And I think that would...
So do you think are you saying that if somebody saw... So I'll try to paint a picture for everybody as simply as I can what a smart receiver does. So many of the new smart receivers, whenever you put let's say a Megatree with 16 outputs onto a smart receiver, you have one smart receiver here that has 4 ports, then you have another smart receiver here that has 4 ports, then you have another one that has 4 ports. That's 12 outputs, okay? And so when you plug into your differential output, you actually are connecting 3, and sometimes it's 16, would be 4 outputs, so 1, 2, 3, 4 boards all into one. What you're saying is, instead of seeing it as A, B, or as let's say 17, 18, 19, 20, that's output 20, then you have the A's, 17, 18, 19, 20 B's, 17, 18, 19, 20 C's, and then the D's. Would be your 16 outputs. It's really hard to visualize this just showing my hands and not having a diagram to show you. But are you saying that it would make sense to add a function that, let's say you click a button and show as 16 ports, and it would click it, and another screen might pop open like the visualizer and say, here's your 16 ports, and it says Megatree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 16, and then they can see it as that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I just think like you would have a button, add a 16 port, you would drag it to your port, it would add it, open another window, you could start dragging them, and you could, in theory, maybe on the original window still have the visual of the daisy chaining, but the daisy chaining is so confusing to an average user. Mm-hmm. That's what, if it's like, I've said in some of my talks I've given at events, it's like, if you're a new smart receivers, I wouldn't avoid them, but I would use them sparingly. Like, if you're having issues with your show, put them on the main ports of the controller and see if it works there. Like, that's, and if it's there, then you know it's your smart receiver issue. And it's even getting more murky, because you have the experience, you have the Falcon, you have all these brands, and maybe the Falcon, if you have the certain SRX, they support auto detect. If you have the 2.01 versions, they don't support auto detect in place. It's like you almost have to have a matrix map of features, and it's like if you use it on FPP controller, it's different than if you use it on a Falcon controller. So it gets very confusing quick. And I can see if you're an average user who, you're just picking this up, you're like, I have no idea, I just want to plug it in and it works. So it becomes a huge, and
so
I know it's a cool concept.
So really stick, if you're new, stick with considering instead of a smart controller, smart receiver, consider it as a dumb receiver, and don't worry about daisy chaining anything off of it just yet. Just use it as 4 individual outputs. And make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and that's what I know. In here we always say, like, 30 feet to your first pixel. I work on a large commercial display, and I wouldn't say live by this rule, but we've gone 90 feet and had no issues. So it's like, yeah, some people are like, oh, I gotta have smart receivers because I'm going such a far distance. If you get an F amp, or even if you have good cabling, you can get 90 feet. I wouldn't say put 500 pixels at 90 feet. That's going to be a disaster. But you could do a 100 pixel prop. at 100 feet. But also, I wouldn't design your show to have all 16 ports be 90 feet. You'd be running into trouble. But one or two, I'm sure, would be fine. So it's sometimes I think it's easier to have a controller in the yard with props locally, plug them in. You can test easy. You can, everything's local, simple. Once you start, spidering things out, yeah. Once you get comfortable in xLights, you get comfortable with the technology, the concepts. Sure, start doing smart receivers. But if you're buying 15 smart receivers your first year and hoping that it's going to work, yeah, you probably could get it to work with a lot of help, but it's going to be a lot of difficulty, I think. So I think that's what, like my first year, I had 5 controllers because I put controllers in zones in my yard. And it's like, you kind of put a controller on your mega tree, you put one on the left of your house, one on the right of your house, put one up in the front of the yard where you're going to have arches, and just localize it a little bit more. So,
Scott, thank you very much. That was it's always good to hear more technical, but also understanding that there is a technical side to it. That it's also just about making smart decisions. And the theme, the overarching theme tonight has been a measured approach. It's been take your time, don't do everything at once. It's great. It's great to hear the basic message. That's probably what the message that everybody should hear. Whenever you feel like you need to jump out and get the next big thing, maybe you don't need to. Let somebody else do it and watch them, and then ask good questions and keep asking good questions, and then when you take that step, you're far more likely to be successful with it because you've done that large amount of research that a lot of us forget that, hey, we should be doing some research. So I'm gonna surprise the panel because I didn't put this in there. This is going to be kind of a off the cuff type thing. I didn't want them to think about this question, so I didn't send this to them. So this is going to be our last, and this is going to be our last question, and then we're going to open up the panel to allow microphones to be open and people can ask questions. So if you're watching on Facebook, I hope you've enjoyed everybody being here. It certainly means a lot to me to be surrounded by everybody here. I never take this community for granted, not once. There are days that I'm tired and exhausted and I need a break, but that's life in the big city whenever you do this kind of thing. But at the same time, this community has done more personally for me. It's made me a better person. It put a meaning and purpose into my life, and I think that's one of the reasons why I spend so much time standing in front of a camera, talking into a microphone, and trying to help people. But beyond that, what I'd like to hear from what I'd like to hear from all of the folks here today, and we'll start with Bobby, and we'll just go right down the line: Bobby, Mynor, Jason, James, and then Scott. I want you to think back to the time that you got started in the hobby and the light bulb went off for you and you got it. You started really understanding the hobby. You started getting it, okay? And what was that moment? What were you doing? What was going on? And if you would share that. For all of the folks, we're going to continue to broadcast this through Facebook. Please jump in after we're done with this part of the session. We'll go ahead and unlock the microphones, and everybody can have a chance to ask their questions. There are a ton of questions in chat. There's a ton of commentary in chat, which I'm so grateful for. And everybody who's in here will have the chance and opportunity to talk to these wonderful folks who donated their evening. So again, thank you to everybody here out there in Facebook land. Bobby, would you please consider what I said earlier? What memory, what the days that led up to you getting it and really understanding the hobby? Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, I'd say probably when I truly got comfortable. Probably late second year into the third year of doing the hobby. That's when finally thinking, I wasn't running into many problems anymore. First year I was struggling through it, trying to just get just trying to get that show up, get it running, and then I bring it out the second year, and what the heck am I doing? But when I got to that third year, that's when everything just worked great. There weren't many issues. I didn't have to go look for help every time I had anything to do. So I would say that's when it clicked for me.
Good, very good. Mynor, a totally different take on it because you came from the Halloween side. It's always good to hear from a different perspective. So, take us on your little experience through that.
So I mean, like I told you, we did a Christmas show 2 years ago, and I was like, in order for me to be able to understand what the customers are going through, I'm going to use every single type of controller that was available. So I had a Colt 32, I had a Falcon with both expansions, so 48 port. I had the Genius controller, and I even had a Wasatch controller in my show. And the whole point was to understand how each one of them worked and which ones were going to give me the headaches and what headaches the customers were going through, so then I can understand the headaches a little bit more. And there was headaches. Oh, there was headaches. They all work differently, and they all work and get the job done. They all do twinkly. They all get the lights to work. But each one of them has their own complications. Each one of them has their own things that you have to be able to do. And so for me, that was 2 years ago when we did our first show, our first Christmas show, was oh my God, okay, I understand this. I think I could support the customers a little bit more. Just understanding the controllers are available, and the controllers change all the time. But every one of the controllers has changed in the last year. Genius has released new stuff, Falcon's released new stuff, Colt has released new stuff. So they all change, and so you have to be able to keep up with the changes too, because with each change also brings more complications, because there's always bugs. That's one thing about controllers, the software. If you update the day before your show opens Thanksgiving, you might run into some problems. And I've seen it happen so many times now. And again, I've only been around for 3 years. This is gonna be our fourth Thanksgiving doing it, so I know that the guys that have been here for at least 10 years, you guys have seen a lot more than I have. But I see it happen every single year for the last 3 years, and I'm expecting it to happen. Hey, I updated the firmware, everything was working fine. Now nothing works. Please help me. And it's that stressful moment right there. So for me, that like I said, I did that. Like we had 2 weeks, and we're like, okay, let's figure this out. Okay, why is there overlap? I was in the Zoom room. I was like, hey guys, I'm not gonna be embarrassed. You guys know who I am, but I am lost. There's overlap on the channels. I can't figure out why this is doing this, and they walked me through the process, and I was like, oh, okay. So even the Zoom room was, if you don't know what the Zoom room is, guys, it's your tool. It is. Those guys are awesome. Scott's in there a lot. They're awesome. They're there to help you guys out, and they'll walk you through it. No judgment. That's what they do. They enjoy doing it, and so I was really happy that I got to get to know those guys, Ron Armstrong, Alex, Mark, all those guys in there. They're pretty awesome, and I got to know them individually because of my headaches. And I was like, hey guys, I got 2 more days to get this show up. Please help me out. And like I said, it finally worked out for me. So I definitely, for me, that was the moment when I figured out, okay, we have to have a process, otherwise the customers are gonna run into the same issues that I did.
So same thing here. I echo the exact same words. Jason, thank you, Mynor. Jason, what was the moment for you? Tell us about the moment that it happened for you, that you got it, and what it was like.
Well, as I said before, this hobby does contain a lot of carpentry. That was no problem for me. Electrical work, this was no problem for me. The computer work was no problem for me. I could not sequence worth a damn. And it was it's just not in my skill set. And here I bought all this stuff, and I put it all together, and I made the lights blink. Granted, test mode stuff, but still it was blinking. But I couldn't do what these guys were doing on their houses. And it was at that point I realized the community we have. I don't have to do this all by myself. I've got PPD, or even, you know, all the other people to help me. You know, you don't. If there's a portion of this hobby you don't like, you're not at a loss, right? It can be, if you don't understand the networking, you've got the resources. If you don't understand the carpentry, you've got the resources. You know, for me, it was sequencing, and once I realized I could get help, and help was readily available, and then this hobby became so much more enjoyable for me, and I realized I was in for the long haul.
So not having to do everything is really what stood out for you. That's great.
Well, just realizing that if you're not perfect at everything, you can still make a great show, because you could just have to take advantage of the resources. And there's a lot of resources on this panel right now.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. This guy has had so many ups and ups in his life. James, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, you know, I think our biggest aha moment was when we quit using rocks to splice pixels. Yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, you go back, because we've seen so much and how this thing's evolved. And, you know, again, the way we did this 10 years ago compared to now it's just amazing, right? I mean, and I got to echo again what everybody's saying. Do not underestimate what the power of the Zoom room is. I can assure you, those guys in there helping people, they've seen the same problem you're having. They've helped other people. They've helped probably hundreds of people with the exact same problem you think you're having, and it's amazing. I know all those guys. I know I don't hang out in there near as much. Clyde, I remember we used to hang out in the various Zoom
we
rooms.
were the ones that stayed in the Zoom room until 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
But
you know, and look, I'm one of these people that I jump in. When I do something, I am 120%, 99% of the time. I mean, it's just, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to get over my head, and there's people smarter than me that I like to surround myself with. Again, I don't sequence. I don't now. I used to. I sequence when I need to, but I got other things I need to do. It's just easier to get with Clyde and Robert, or, you know, one of the other sequencers if I need to, but there's so many resources out there, and you know, the ability to go to Scott. Hey, Scott, this is what I'm seeing, or go to Keith Wesley, or, you know, one of the other developers. There's a lot of things in xLights that you try to find a better way to do. It's like, I can't figure out how to do this. Keith has written, you know, like for our Ultimesh. So the principle behind that Ultimesh was, you can take all these little matrix panels, you can create this crazy design with voids in it and stack it up. I use a mega tree. I make a mega tree out of mesh panels in my display at home. But when you want to sequence that, you want to sequence that as a mesh, a single piece of mesh, not 20 different pieces of mesh that create this triangular shaped Christmas tree. Heath wrote a program that's on our website that you go and you can stack all these different Ultimeshes, create this design, and then it exports out both the model and the shadow model that you sequence off of in xLights. And it does all that in the background. Then when you go to import it, it knows where all those inputs, you know, channel 1 is, pixel 1 is rather, and when you go to map it, you just drag that one matrix right over to the visualizer, and poof, it pops it out on all the outputs as you described with those on those mesh panels. You know, the resources, and yes, I agree. Do not download a new version the day before your show goes live. Pick a version, stick with it, make it work, go there. But that's the advantage of this hobby, and the people who are driving this hobby, is they're constantly pushing our tools that are available to us. You know, it's unheard of for, you know, professional companies to release 50, 60 releases of a version of software in a year. And that happens on a regular basis with xLights. There's just so many people just donating their time. How much time does Scott spend on it, you know, developing or tweaking different aspects of xLights? And those guys just donate their time. It's amazing.
I have to say, I think whenever I'm sequencing and I sit there and I think of something, then I put it in GitHub and I hope that they look at it and maybe take it, somewhat like, okay, maybe that is a good idea. I often think, I wonder, am I asking them to do 40 or 50 hours worth of work, as I would sequence a song that takes me 40 or 50 or 60 hours worth of work to do that, and to know that you're doing it and you're putting it into the software, and that the only thing you get out of it is a thank you, because it's being used, and because what is there, but at the same time, the benefit to that is that it gets used by many people. It's not just one person that gets to use it. So in your case with that Utilimesh, James, thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you here. And the elite, now almost head developer of xLights, Mr. Scott Hanson. Scott, you've had your share of ups and downs in the hobby. What was your aha moment? What brought it together for you, and what was that like?
I guess the thing I remember most is like what you talked about when we went to Texas. I went to Texas. That was after my first year doing lights. I still feel like I didn't know anything. And then I sat in, at the time I actually went I paid to go to the xLights training. And I sat in the training, and Sean asked me if I could help in the training, and I was like, why? And so I sat in his beginner training and helped people, and it just felt to me like, I actually kind of knew what I was talking about a little bit when I was helping people. So that was very interesting. It gave me confidence, maybe too much hubris, but it made me feel like I knew what I was doing. And also there, just meeting people like Clyde and meeting Sean, meeting Keith. At the end of the day, meeting James, they're just regular people. It's not like you watch Clyde's videos and you start to think he's like a demigod sometimes or something. But at the end of the day, he's still a normal person. He's still, he puts his shoes on, I'm assuming, and puts his pants on one leg at a time. So it's like you meet these people in real life, and you learn about their lives. And that's why I personally like going to events. I talk about xLights, but it's also good to know just people, like, Clyde's background in restaurants. You learn about, everyone's background and their family, and it kind of brings it, it brings everything around to you a little bit. And that's what I like about the hobby, and why I have this weird fascination, or I don't know, why I keep working on stuff. Like you're saying, someone puts a feature request in, I'm like, sure, I'll work on it, and then like 4 hours later I maybe have it working, and it's like, I'm sure they didn't realize it was that much time, but
no, I seriously, when I sit there and I sequence a song and I'm working on something, I sit there and I think, if I ask them to do this, are they gonna spend as much time as I think that they're gonna have to spend? Because if they are, I don't want to ask. You understand what I mean? Because we all know that number one thing we have that we're never going to get back is the time we put into something. So that really does. That's the sincerity that I think that a lot of us have. Like, James doesn't just call you up and say, oh, well, since you're working around in xLights, it'd really be great to have this. He asks because he has a need. I remember the mesmerizer. That's one instance where he called up Keith and he said, Keith, I really need this, and because the model didn't do something right.
We maxed it out. It wouldn't go over 999 nodes,
and nobody knew that.
Yeah,
nobody knew that. And I called him up and I said, I have 300 different color palettes in my xLights right now, and they're disappearing. I create a new one and they just start disappearing off. And he says, well, there's a limit. You can only have so many. And I said, what happens if you expand that? And he says, I can't promise that xLights will be entirely stable, but I'll add it for you. And it's still stable, but it's a little more stuttery now. And I know that, but nobody else does. So, Scott, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you just there's.
Yeah. And I see it as a give and take too. Like, I don't know if anyone knows this, but if you go into like xLights and so the color palettes in xLights, there's like predefined ones. Those are from Clyde. Those are Clyde's color palettes. Like, you know, we wanted to add more color palettes. We saw Clyde's videos, and Clyde had a really good collection of them, so we put them in xLights. So there's kind of a give and take of, yeah, like, and as I do more larger shows, I used to just blow off requests, be like, oh, it's a drive-through issue because they got too many stuff. But now it's like, I do a lot of drive-throughs, so I actually like to, I do a couple of drive-throughs, so it's like, now I'm adding features for myself as well, but just, so it's a little bit, you know, back and forth. And sometimes requests are a little ridiculous, or like, yeah, we could add that, but that's like 100 hours of work, so no, I'm not going to do that. Where, oh yeah, that may be, I get in my mind, I'll be like, oh, that's going to take maybe 8 hours. That won't be too
told
hard.
no several times.
So it's, yeah, it kind of depends, and I don't know, that's what I just like the interactivity, and to me the challenge of like what Jason said too is it's electronics, it's software, it's networking, it's everything. It's like, I don't know, as a guy, I like working on tractors, I like working on electronics, I like doing things with my hands. It's like you can only sit on a computer so many hours a day, so it's nice to go in the yard and hook up props and figure and challenges and stuff like that. So,
well, everybody, we've reached the end of tonight's discussion. So if you're on Facebook, we hope that you have enjoyed this little discussion. It's not so round table, but more like a flat table discussion from left to right here. These guys have been wonderful. You can tell that we know each other, but the thing is that's what this hobby is about, and it has been a true privilege to bring you here and hear just from you guys, and I really appreciate it, and the community appreciates it too. So if you're on Facebook or if you're watching live, go ahead and join the Zoom room. We're going to end the roundtable discussion here, and then we're going to go into the Zoom room and just have an open forum discussion. There are a number of questions. I see one question in chat. If you want to start putting your hands up for the folks that are in the Zoom room who have questions, we're going to get the mics unmuted here and set up so that people can talk. And but in any event, guys, it's been wonderful having everybody here. Huge thank you to you all. And that's part 2, guys. Thank you for joining us. If you made it the whole way through today's presentation, you get a gold star. We really appreciate you. I hope you just put it on and let it play, and just listen to all of the knowledge that was shared. This was a fantastic session, and it's another reminder. Join us every Tuesday. We do either a webinar or we do a PPD open mic night. You're welcome to join us. There's no charge. You don't have to be club members. It's just where we get together. We try to have a fantastic time together as a holiday lighting family community, and we try to have some good wholesome fun. So you're welcome to join us, guys. Thank you for watching today's video. I know it's a little later in posting it, but it's still great information, especially whenever you are coming to grips with xLights, or you just want to hear other things that, you know, other people actually think the same thing you do too, and you never mentioned it out loud. So guys, that's everything from me here at Pixel Pro Displays. If you like the video, give us a huge thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the PPD YouTube channel, and if you haven't done yet so already, consider joining the PPD Sequence Club to help support us here at what we do. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye for now.